Tableau Part 2. Now we're not going to spend as much time on Tableau as we did with Excel and SQL. And in part that's because so much to Tableau is just personal preference or design. With Excel you had to write your formulas a certain way or else you'd get the incorrect response. And same thing with SQL. If you didn't write your code right, you won't get an answer. But Tableau, you can mix and match a lot of things and create your map and change your map, and I bet you one map is going to look different from all the other maps in the class. So that's most of the reasons why we're not going to spend too much time on Tableau, but I wanted to go over a quick review of what we learned last class, and then later on we're going to go over two different types of maps, even though for the most part 90% of it is going to be the same. But this is practice and it'll get us in a little bit more familiarity with how to import data and where to put our information as we create the maps. So when you imported data, you looked at the data and then you created a new worksheet in Tableau. Right? First you connected and made sure, I should say, that your data is cleaned up before you actually import it. That's important because you can't do too much data cleaning in Tableau itself. Then you would click the sheet number 1 at the bottom and go to a new worksheet. And that's obviously the sort of the blank platform where you create your map. And remember, you can right click on a field to the left to change the dimensions or measures. You can change the name, you can change the format, you can change the number type like currency or percentage. And then we start dragging our data into the appropriate boxes. The details box is our main box, sort of like rows was to pivot tables. But there's also a color box, a size box, a labels box, which we didn't go over, and of course the filter. Then you choose your map option. And for the most part, Tableau gives you two options. One, a fill map, where each county, for instance, is shaded. Or two, a point map, where specific dots would appear on your boundary. You can also click map and then map layers for more background displays. We can add rows, we can add county names, county borders, state names, state borders, parks, etc. And finally you have your tooltip or your pop-up box, and there you can refine your text. You can change the font, the layout, the size, the color, etc. And then you create a dashboard in Tableau. And you do that by clicking Dashboard, New Dashboard. And the first thing that I do is change the size of my dashboard on the left. Usually I want a width of around 700, at least for the Observer's web page. And the height really depends on the shape of my map. I click floating and I drag my map into the display box and I resize it to fit. Sometimes you have to zoom in or zoom out. And then I take care of all the legends, filters, source information. And remember, if you double click on it, you can change the font and the color. And if you right click on it, you can also change the format. In other words, add a boundary or the shade behind it. Add chatter to the title area and format that as well. And once you have all your finishing touches that you really like, you save to Tableau Public As, and that's under the File menu. And that produces a link that you can show to other folks, or an embed code where if you had a web page, you can embed it into your web page. So that's a quick review. I posted two data sets for you. One, hopefully it went through, is a shapefile, which is a mapping file that I exported from a different mapping program. And the other is either a Excel or a CSV. So let's check them out. Okay, the files that I posted online, the ones that we'll work with in class are Charlotte murders, and that is a latitude, longitude for all 87 homicides in Charlotte in 2017. So we're going to create a map using them. And the other one we'll use in class is called Tableau _with _average. And you'll want to download all 7 of those files. So starting with the .cpg all the way down to the .shx. And when you combine these files, they're called a shapefile. And a shapefile is a sort of a mapping file that Tableau can read as well. So we'll start with that one. It's called Tableau with average. And we'll import it and check it out. So download, and do me a favor, make a copy of your Charlotte Murders. I don't know if you'll be able to make a copy of it or not with the Tableau with average, but copy Charlotte Murders and open up Tableau and import it. I'm going to Tableau now, opening it up, and I'm going to grab Charlotte Murders. I forget if it was a text file. Yeah, it was a text file and actually a CSV. So I'm going to import that. And you do that by the import options on your left, and automatically our data pops up. So I'm going to go over the data real quick. Like I said, there should be 87 rows, 1 row for each homicide in 2017. And we have the date the homicide happened, the victim's name, the general reason for the homicide, whether it's domestic or a robbery, the race and age of the victims, the location block, like 100 block numbers for the location, latitude and longitude, which we'll need to create the map, and a description, whether it was abuse, burns, gunshot, knife wound, etc. So there's our data. Now let's click on, or double click on sheet 1. And I'm going to rename it while I'm at it. I'm just going to call it Murders. Okay, and this is our worksheet. This is where we create our map. And you can see on the left, Tableau automatically recognizes our latitude, longitude as a geography type format. So it's saying, okay, if you're going to map this data, you map it on latitude and longitude. In this case, it's correct. And longitude, you drag to the columns up top, and latitude, you drag to rows. So let's do that, and let's get our map started. Longitude to columns, latitude to rows. And there it goes. There's a single dot right where Mecklenburg County is. And just FYI, if for some reason latitude and longitude were backwards, you can right click, geographic role, and you can see right now that latitude is selected. I can change that to longitude and vice versa. So if you ever need to switch back and forth for whatever reason, right click, geographic role, latitude, longitude. But we're good right here. And we have one location automatically selected, and that's Mecklenburg County. Now to map all of our murders, we need to think of what's a distinct field to have them all pop up. You know, if I were to drag race in there, I'd have a lot pop up, but I probably only have 6 or 8 because there's might be some white folks, some black folks, maybe American Indian, Asian, Hispanic. So that's what it would map. But if I were to drag location, which had my block number, I bet you a lot of them would pop up. So take location and drag it to details. Okay. Now this isn't the best map yet, so we have to fine tune it because I can sort of recognize Mecklenburg County. Here's the Catawba River right here. And here's the South Carolina border right there. But I'm going to clean it up a little bit. And I'm going to go up to Map, Map Layers. And I'm going to click off the base and the land cover. I'm going to add streets and highways. There we go. That for a Charlotte resident, that's starting to make sense to me. And I'm going to see if I can add State is already there, but there should be a county border, which I'll add that as well. Yeah, county border. Okay, that looks a little bit better. And maybe cities as well. And you can see that Belmont, Charlotte, Harrisburg all popped up. Now I'm going to back it up a little bit just to give you a little bit better view. So they're the homicides in Mecklenburg County. And right now, if I hover over any of them, what do I have? I have the latitude and longitude, and I have the location, the street block. Okay. I'm going to click off map layers because they're the ones I'm going to choose. If you think there's any more important ones, feel free to add them. But I'm going to stick with those. So I'm going to click off map layers, and I'm back to my field names on the left. What else do I want in a map that shows where Charlotte's homicides were? What about the victim's name and his or her race? And age is a number, so I'm going to drag that in there. Now I'm just building my tooltip, my pop-up box. And I'm going to grab description as well. And now look, when we hover over our data, we have description. For this case was negligent. It happened at the 300 block of Harrison Street. The victim's race was black, and the victim's name was Majestic Bush. And there's no age in this case, so the age is blank. Now you can look at that and say, well, why the heck would we need a latitude and longitude? You're exactly right. So I'm going to go up to latitude and longitude, right click, and right now you see it's included in tooltip with that check on the left. I'm going to check it again, and I'm going to do the same thing with latitude. So now they're unchecked, and there you go. My latitude and longitude are gone. Okay. There is one other field in there that I could grab. I could grab the date, so let's check that out. And sometimes dates are funny in Tableau, but we'll see what it looks like. So date. So this just has the year. We'll see if we can actually get the date, like the actual month, day, and year. To do that, we click on the date down here that is added, and you can see how it says year/date. So click on the drop down, and year is highlighted with the bullet. Scroll down to day and choose day. And now the dates pop up. 11/16/2017. You can also right click on here and choose, let me see if I can do it. I think it's right click and default properties, change data type, and you don't get an answer here. I've had people struggle with it by trying to change the format on the left, but you would go to here and change it from year to day. Okay, so what information do we have? We have the description, gunshot, location, the race, the victim's name, the date that it happened, and then the age. So let's change the color now, and we're going to keep this as a point map because we really can't shade it by by county or by a neighborhood. We're given specific latitude and longitude, so we have to keep it as the point location on each map. That's what those latitude and longitudes did. They mapped where our points should go. So I'm going to change the color, and I guess you could color it by maybe description, have all gunshots one color, and all stabbings another color, so that's fine. In fact, we can do that by grabbing description and place it in color, and there we go. And then if you click on color, you can edit them. In this case, abuse and trauma is blue, burns are orange, and down and so on. But I'm going to remove mine from color and I'm just going to keep them all blue. So I'm going to right click and remove, and now it's just back in my details box. So feel free, if you want to color them yourself, that's fine. I'm just going to keep them all one color, and I'm going to adjust my color a little bit, and I'm going to go more colors, and you can see you got a wide range of colors to choose from. And in fact, if you Google color and HTML, you can get any color in the rainbow and a code associated with it. And you can copy and paste that specific code for that specific color you want right into here, and that color will appear. So if there's a specific shade of purple that you want, Google purple HTML and you'll get hundreds of purples a shade. So you can do that. I'm just going to choose a different color, blue. Now I'm going to click OK. Now I'm going to click back on my colors to give them a little border like that. And you could do a halo, which is essentially a thicker border. I'm not going to, but that's what a halo looks like. But I'm going to click off that and click none. And I'm going to keep the transparency where it's at because I really don't have to see anything behind the points. Now the last thing we want to do in the worksheet is make the tooltip a little bit better. Right now our tooltip is sort of, it has the information, but it's not necessarily organized or pleasant to look at anyway. You can click on tooltip, or you can go up to your worksheet and grab it from there. But here's the code behind all the pop-up box information. And I personally think that the victim's name is most important. So I'm going to Control X that to cut it, and I'm going to paste that one up top. Control V. And honestly, in our chatter, when we lay it out, we're going to have that these are homicide victims, so I don't even think I need that victim to precede my victim's name, so I'm going to delete that. And then I'm guessing second most important is probably location, so I'm going to cut and paste that second. And again, I bet if you just have a street block that people are going to know that's where the homicide happened. So I'm going to get rid of the location in front. And then I would guess the probably third most important might be the date. And I'm going to kill off the day of date as well. X. Control V. Then description, then race, and then age. And I'll leave them in that order. And just FYI, if I wanted to change description to how it happened, you just highlight it and type over it how it happened. But in this case, I'm not going to have anything. So I'm going to erase that, and people are going to know it's the race, and people are going to know it's an age, because we publish this data all the time. Now you can keep some of those lead-in words, that's fine. I'm going to get rid of them. Now I'm going to change the type and sort of make it a little bit more pleasant to look at by centering it. It's already bold. I'm going to go 12-point font. Then I'm going to change the font type, and you can pick out whatever ones that you want. And in fact, I'm going to make the victim's name a little bit bigger to a 14-point. And in between the victim or the location and the date, actually I'm going to do it in between the date and the description. I'm going to put just a little, a bunch of hyphens just to break up my text. And I'm going to change the color of the victim to the blue that are selected in my dots. And I'm going to do the same thing for the hyphens. Again, this is all just personal preference. And I'm going to check it out or preview it by click OK, then hover over it. So that's what it will look like. And you can hover over another one and another one. And that's not offensive to me. I can live with that. It's not the best, but for our purposes, it gets our data across to the reader, right? So there we go. Now I'm going to create a dashboard. And if I wanted to, I could add a race as a filter, or the victim's name as a filter, or maybe even description might be the best, so I can filter out all the gunshots, but that's not terribly important to me. So I'm going to create a dashboard by dashboard, new dashboard. And this is where we put the final touches on our map. And the first thing that I do is change the size. And that's easy by getting away from a range and do a fixed size. And like I said, I always start with a 700 width. And Mecklenburg is pretty much as tall as it is wide, so I'm going to do a perfect square and put a 700 height as well. And there you go. That's the shape of my new dashboard. Click floating because I want to be able to move my map around, and drag your map in there anywhere, and then just make it sized to fit. There we go. So far it's going well, and click on the magnifying glass to the right of the arrow to zoom in. This may take 1 or 2 times to get the nice zoom that you want. In fact, I want it a little bit tighter than that if possible. Okay, so that's how much I want zoomed. To move the map around, click on the 4 arrows, and now I can hold down my left cursor and move the map around. It's sort of like a little grabber or a little hand. Okay? Now what do we need to do? We need to add maybe a source box and some chatter. This one, because I didn't color code them a certain way, I don't have a legend, which you may have if you want to add it. But I'm going to add a source box, floating text. Double click on that, and a text box pops up, and you just type in source, and in this case, it's CMPD, Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department 2017. CMPD 2017. That's where I get the information from. And I'm going to change a little some of this just to make it uniform. And I'm going to make it stand out a little bit by making it black. If I have to highlight it, I apologize. Highlight to change the font. And click OK. There's my source, and I'm just going to tuck it in down here. Even make it a little bit lower. Okay, there's my source. Now that I'm looking at it, those points are pretty small. And if you go back to your worksheet, the one that we called murders, open that up and click on size. And that's the default size that the Tableau gives us, but you can drag this and make them a little bit bigger. You can make them real big if you want. That doesn't make any sense to me, so I'm just going to make them a little bit bigger. And click back on my dashboard because that'll save any changes, and there you go. I think that looks a little bit better. And this isn't going to be the focal point of our story. This is just sort of one, we can use it for reporting, and we can take notes off of the map, which I'll end up doing. And it may be a quick display for the readers, but this is not, of course, going to be the focal point of the story. Now, what about some chatter? I don't expect any of you all to be familiar with Charlotte, but Charlotte has an affluent wedge right down between this main road, essentially, and this main road. Is a pretty affluent neighborhood. We call it the Wedge, South Wedge in Charlotte. And a lot of this area, sort of where the homicides happened, is lower income. So I could add that to my chatter. So I'm going to double click on murders to get up my little chatter box, my text box. and say many of Charlotte's homicides happened in the Crescent, locals call it that. Oops, Crescent around Uptown. Okay, so I have many of Charlotte's homicide happened in the Crescent around Uptown. Most of the neighborhoods in the Crescent are low income and struggle with high rates of crime. Let's change the font. Again, you can change it to any color or size that you want. Just make it legible. And we'll see how it looks. We may have to add words or kill off some words depending on how it fits, but we'll see about that. Click apply, click OK. See, actually I have some space here and some space here. I can add a few words if I can think of them off the top of my head. So I could say many of Charlotte's 87 homicides in 2017 happened in the Crescent around Uptown, or maybe I can call it Center City. Most of the neighborhoods in the Crescent are low income and struggle with high rates of crime. Let's see if that looks a little bit better. Okay, it fills in a little bit. And as a secondary piece to my story, this sort of does what I need it to do. You know, this has the information, and it has it's a good reporting tool, because if I didn't map the homicides, I wouldn't know that most of them happened in that Crescent around Uptown, and very few happened in this affluent wedge, right? In fact, it looks like most of them actually happened to the northwest of the city, a cluster to the northwest, and some along like busy thoroughfares. So I could add some graphs that I developed from my map to my actual story. Does that make sense? So what would I actually say in the story? Well, I could say something like this in my story: that many of Charlotte's 87 homicides happened in the Crescent that surround Uptown. The Crescent is most often home to low-income neighborhoods that have struggled with high rates of crime or high crime rates. Northwest Charlotte had the highest concentration of murders, data show. About a fourth of the city's murders happened in neighborhoods that sit northwest of the city's center. By contrast, only 4 people were murdered in the city's affluent areas to the south of Uptown. And I gleaned all that information from looking at my map, which essentially was the data that I used to tell the story. Now, the last thing I would have to do with my map is click File, save the Tableau Public As, and sometimes Tableau Public has a different save option, but usually it's saved to Tableau Public As. And I'm not connected right now to the internet, but when you were connected, just give it a name, and that would spit out a link and an embed code, just like we saw before. Okay, I just got connected, so it says save to Tableau Public As, and then you log in under your name or your email address. And as long as I'm still connected, it'll let me rename it, and I'll call it Murders Data Class. Save. And as long as you're online, it should spit out a web page, like a preview, with your map and a link where you can download the map or show it to someone. Right here, there's my link that I can copy and paste it into a browser, and there's my web page if I ever wanted to publish it online. Does this all make sense? A nice review. And like I said, a lot of Tableau is just personal preference. We want to get the data there. We want to make sure the data is accurate, but a lot of that comes before we actually import it. And then you display the data in a way that, one, makes sense visually, makes sense for the story, and fits your preferences. Okay, so let's try one more map. I'm going to minimize this, and I'm going to X out of my Tableau. And I'm going to import this big file, Tableau with average. And this is a shape file. And to import a shape file, we open up Tableau. And this gives us our blank landing page. Well, a shapefile is a spatial file. It's a mapping file. So double click on that and navigate to wherever you're able to download it. If by small chance this file was too big for me to send over the web, just watch and see if you can get some pointers just by watching rather than doing it as well. But I'll import it. And you can see here's all my data. And a lot of this data we won't even need. A lot of it's code for the map that I created earlier. But we'll use a couple of it. And I'll show you what we'll use. We're going to use this census tract right here. Tracts are neighborhood boundaries that the census draws. And essentially they're boundaries with about, I believe it's either 3,000 or 5,000 people in each census tract. And this is how the census operates. It doesn't operate by specific Charlotte neighborhoods. It defines its own tracts. And the other columns we'll use are change, sum, average, previous. You can only see a couple of letters, and average, current, and change, average. And what this is revaluation data by, or grouped by, like we would in SQL, grouped by census tract. Now every 8 years, Charlotte, the city, values land properties. So say my house was valued at $2,000 or $200,000 back in 2011. Well, every 8 years, so that would be 2019, it would come around and it would revalue how much my land is worth and my house is worth. And it does that for tax purposes. So what this data says is it groups all the revals by neighborhood, and then it gives the previous average for that neighborhood and the current average for that neighborhood, as well as the average change, percent change. And remember we did that in Excel. So in this case, we can see what neighborhoods have had their property values go up the fastest and what neighborhoods may have had it go up the slowest. So I'm going to click on sheet 1, and there's our blank worksheet with all our fields, many of which just go to support the previous mapping file that we used to create this data. Okay? But this field, geometry, you can see how Tableau is recognizing the shapefile as, okay, this is what I want to map it on. And it does it to that county as well, but it's just thinking, okay, it's just for Mecklenburg. I recognize the county name. And if I were to drag that into details, I think that would just put a spot on Mecklenburg and not allow me to map all the counties, or all the neighborhoods, I should say. So I'm going to drag geometry, and I'm going to put that into details. And there we go. That's Mecklenburg County right there with all those census tracts. I think there are like 260 or 230 of them, if not more, outlined. And right now, if you hover over them, nothing appears, because all we did is just drag our boundaries in there. Now I'm going to take the tract and drag it into details as well. Not many people know what their census tract is, but at least it'll sort of give each boundary a name. In this case, that census tract, which is to the northwest of the city, is census tract 6104. And uptown is sort of around here, so that's census tract 1. All right. And to get a better visual of my location, I'm going to go up to map like we've done before, map layers, click off the base information, add a street and highways, and I'm also going to add county border, and if I can add cities, just like I did before. And as a Charlotte resident, that gives me a better understanding of what I'm looking at. Okay, now I'm back with my data on the left. What I would want to map this by, and you can probably guess, is I have my old value, average, I have my new value, average, and then I have the percent change. And both this change average and change sum are the same numbers, so I can map it by either one of them. But I think the percent change is what folks would be interested in the most. What neighborhoods saw their value increase the most since 2011? With that said, I'm going to grab change average and put it into colors. And there we go. Click off show me, and you can see that displays my map legend right there. And I'm going to take change average, right click on it. Why? Because I need to change the data type. These are a percent change. I need to show that it's a percent. So we remember from last class, we go default properties, number format, percentage. I'm going to keep the 2 decimal points. Click OK. And now you can see like Uptown Charlotte right there, which is part of Uptown. The average home price from 2011 to 2019 increased 42.79%. And if you go to these darker tracks, the average price there increased 133%. That blew up. So you can see what neighborhoods are starting to blow up. But it's a little bit hard to tell with the color scheme that we have now. So play around with the colors by clicking on color, edit color, and the drop down from automatic. Select whatever color scheme you think looks the best and sort of tells the best story. I'll try doing it myself, and I usually go with the orange to blue, but for the heck of it, I'm going to steer away from that. Let's see, maybe red to blue. We'll see how that looks. It's a little red, huh? Now I can fix that overwhelmingly red look, right? Because right now it's just saying, okay, what's in between, what's halfway point of 0, which is up here, 0, and the halfway point between that and 155. That's how it's mapping which ones are red and which ones are blue. So I'm going to click on color and edit color, then advanced. And once you get advanced, you get this drop down box right here. And the center starts for me at 0.77 because they're saying that's the halfway point between 0 and 155, and that makes sense. But I can manually change that just to get a better color scheme. And I'm going to change it to, say, 44. And you can play around with this to see what one works best. I'm going to click apply, click OK. Now that visually looks a lot better, and people still understand that the reds didn't increase very much. The light blues were a pretty good increase, and the dark blues were a large increase of property values, right? But again, this is all personal preference. You can color code it however you'd like, as long as it's accurate and it tells a story. And on top of that, I'm going to click back on color, And I'm going to change my transparency because I'm going to change it down to 50. 50. Let's just do a straight 50. Okay. And why am I doing that? Well, if I wanted to zoom in, say I lived in just west of Uptown, but I wanted to find out what exactly tract my house is in. And it's in one of these, I just can't tell. So I could zoom in, and I could eventually see the roads. That's why I'd like doing a transparent county map if I'm just mapping a single county. If you zoom in it far enough, the road names will eventually appear. So, and of course you couldn't see all this without having it being transparent. And there's 485 right there, 77 right there, and I can tell that's Independence Boulevard. And a lot of times when you zoom in, you actually see the names. It's not quite working right now. Let me see if one more time. Yeah, so this is only giving me the names of the interstates, but locals would know what the other roads are. So that's why I'm making it transparent. And now I'm going to try to center it a little bit. So what else do we own? We have the name of the tract. We have the percent change. What about the previous average for each tract and the current average for each tract? I think that's important information. So I'm going to do the average current, drag that into details, average previous, drag that into details. And what do we have? Okay, now the two things about that is they're supposed to be dollar signs. In other words, for this tract, the average current value of a home is $172,000 and it was $110,000, so we need to change that format. By right click, default properties, number format, currency custom is what I do, and I don't need any zeros after them. Okay. Do the same thing for previous. Default properties, number format, currency custom, and get rid of the zeros. Okay, there we go. Now we have dollar signs with the average current and average previous, and a percent change with the percent sign. Okay. Zoom out a little bit and get rid of my selection. There we go. Zoom out. What are some other things we need to do before we actually create our dashboard? Well, there's no other fields on the left that I want to add because this is mostly information from my map. So I'm going to change the tooltip, save it, and then create a dashboard. So worksheet, tooltip. I'm going to leave this word tract up there because not many people know what a census tract is, so I'm just going to keep it there. I'm going to change some of this lead-in information. I'm going to call it average current value. And average previous value. And then percent change. Right? Now take a minute and give it the font and the color that you like, or you think works best for your map. And I'm going to do that right now. And I'm also going to do a center it in the middle. And I'm going to add a little bit of different coloring just to make the data stand out from the lead-in words. This is not hard to do, but it does take a second or two. And there we go. What I did is change all the data to a black and I left my lead-in information, left that blue, and I'm gonna actually make my track black, and I'm gonna bump up the font for that. So let's see how that works. That's not terrible. And honestly, I can probably get rid of, now that I'm thinking about it, I can probably get rid of that lead-in tracked word. So I'm going to go back up to tooltip, right there, and I'm going to delete this tracked colon. Okay. I think that works. So census tract 2 had an average current value of 115,000. The average previous value for a home was 71,000, and that's a 63% increase, right? So you can save it now if you want, before we create our dashboard if you're worried about losing any data. But I'm going to go right up to Dashboard, New Dashboard. And here's our layout. We always start with the size, from range to fixed size, and 700 width. And like we did before when we did Charlotte homicides, I'm going to do a 700 height as well. So there's our display box. Our map is called Sheet 1 because I never renamed it, but that's okay. So I'm going to click floating, take my map, drag it over, and resize it. And you can see that this time I have a legend because I have a color scheme. So I'm going to take my legend and I'm going to place that to, usually it's in the bottom. You can place it wherever you want as long as it's out of the way. And I'm going to zoom in the best I can to see if I can get a halfway decent view. And that actually looks somewhat alright. Maybe I'll try it again just so I get the entire map in there. That looks better. Then I grab it like that and center it. Okay, I think we have the beginning to a halfway decent map that tells a story. Just looking at this map, you can see, using the key, that the homes that increase the most in value are around Uptown. And remember what I said on the last story, that these homes in that crescent around Uptown are usually the low-income neighborhoods. So what does that tell me? Maybe it tells you that real estate developers are buying up these low-income neighborhoods, the homes there, and they're trying to gentrify the neighborhoods, building nice new houses there. Look at this neighborhood down here. That percent change went from $52,000 to $133,000 for a 155% increase on the average home in the past 8 years. That's a lot of change. So I'm going to add a little bit of chatter that says something like that. And again, this chatter I know because I've reported on this story and because I'm familiar with Charlotte. But hopefully by the time you're creating a map from whatever data you're looking at, you're familiar with the topic as well. So I'm going to click on my box and start typing, saying something like homes in So I have homes in some of Charlotte's historically low-income neighborhoods saw the biggest change in values. The average increase for some parts of town topped 155%. So we'll change the layout for that, and we'll see how it fits into my chatter box. Click apply. I could add a little bit more, and maybe I will. The average increase from 2011 to 2019. Let's see that. That's a little bit better. And again, I could add a border around here or change the shading. Again, that's a personal preference thing. And I'm going to change the type here. I'm going to call it %change. I center it. Bump up the font just a little bit, as well as change the font. Click OK. There we go. Anything else that I'd have to add to the map? Maybe a source box. I always like telling readers where we got our data from. So click on floating, click on text, and this source where I got this data was Mecklenburg County. And it's important to add a source because we want to be as transparent in our reporting as possible, and adding a source is just like adding an attribution to a sentence. So you want to do that. And I'm making all my type uniform. Click OK. I'm going to put that out of the way as well. So that's not bad. That map right there, if you were to look at it and look at % change in home values and the key, you could see that there's a large swath where the home values increased a heck of a lot. Like I said, 155 for that neighborhood, tract 23, which is Greer Heights neighborhood, 133%, 124. So that map right there tells a pretty interesting story. I'm going to save this. I'm still connected to the web anyway. File, save the Tableau public as. So do me a favor and save it, just so in case you have to refer back to it with maybe how you created the map. But I'm going to show you some graphs that we at the Observer gleaned from using this map, along with a few interviews from our reporting. And here you go. And this came directly out of some of the stories that we wrote. The areas that saw the biggest average increase in values were historically black neighborhoods close to uptown. In recent years, they've seen a big influx of investors and new residents buying older properties, either to renovate or to tear down and build larger homes. Now, the first part of that sentence was from the data. The second part of that was from just observation and interviews. Then we go on to say that the 5 census tracts with the highest average increase include Greer Heights, Washington Heights, Druid Hills, Villa Heights, and Belmont. On average, property values in those neighborhoods increased by 126 to 156%. Many individual properties doubled or even tripled in value. While close-in neighborhoods rocketed up in value, many suburban parts of Mecklenburg County still have houses worth more on average. Although suburban values increased at a slower rate than close-in neighborhoods, they still grew substantially. And what that is referring to is here. Look at the home value in that area. Average current value, $1.1 million. Now, it didn't go up very fast. It was at $872,000, so it only went up 36%. But compared to this neighborhood, just to the west of it, where it's $500,000 and then $200,000, you can see how it didn't increase as fast, but the actual home value is a heck of a lot more. Then we say, for example, the census tract containing the lakeside portions of Cornelius saw an increase of 32% below the median rate for the county. but that percentage increase equates to about $180,000 as the average value of a house there rose to $731,000. Although Greer Heights, which is the neighborhood that I highlighted, property values increased 5 times as fast at a rate of 156%, that increase only took property values to $133,000. That means the average Greer Heights house is still worth barely a fifth of the average Lakeside Cornelius home. But the areas with the highest average property value is the census tract that covers Eastover and parts of Myers Park. Property values there jumped 37% to an average of more than $1.2 million. That was right around the neighborhood that I showed you. Another clear trend, the increase in property values along the Blue Line light rail. Property values for the string of census tracts paralleling the light rail's southern half increased faster than neighboring tracts not along the light rail. And the light rail in Charlotte is a mini train line that runs right down here, and then the new extension runs out here. And you can see how that clearly is a sharp increase compared to the neighborhoods just to the east or west of it. And the same thing out here, where it's an increase compared to the neighborhoods just outside the light rail's reach. And finally, we say the census tract covering South End, as well as the surrounding neighborhoods like Sedgefield, all increased by 50% or more, with most seeing values increase on average of 60% and some nearly doubling. So there you have it. That's 2 maps that tell different stories, but they, as you can tell with the sentences that I just read, they really helped us out with reporting our stories, and they gave the readers a better experience because the readers could see, okay, I live in this neighborhood. How do my values and the percent those values changed compared to anyone else? You know, and you wouldn't get that information from anything other than a map. Even though we had all this data at our fingertips and we were able to run it through Excel or SQL, a map gives it a whole new look. Well, they are 2 more examples of maps in Tableau. Next time we're going to move on to a couple of charts in Tableau, but before then, some homework. Okay, here's your homework. Download the CSV file called State Pops. I posted that online. Write a formula in the file that calculates the percent change in population for each state from 2010 to 2017. Now there's a column that you'll have to fill in that has the percent change. Then create a Tableau map that colors each state by the percent change in population.